Hello everyone, okeanskiy here. In this video, I'm going to be making a house claiming system where players can claim a house by pressing a button, and when they leave it becomes unclaimed and a new owner can claim it, and you can have many houses on a block, and the players can also teleport home via a button. So I'm going to be showing you guys how to make this in just 3 small little scripts. So let's get started. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to go ahead and do is import the house we're going to be using. Now, in this case, you don't have to have all the houses be the same. You can have different ones, as long as you set them all up the same way. And you'll see what I mean in a second here. So I'm going to go ahead and make a folder called house. And I'm going to go ahead and import the actual building. Oopsie. Going to import the actual building inside that folder, and I'm just going to place it where I want to. And then we'll be adding a few things to this. The first of which is a sign to show which player owns the house to all the other players. So I just have a sign that has a billboard GUI on it. And that one has a text label, and that one has just some text with some settings that I have, and that will be used to show who owns the house. And the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to insert a part into the same folder. I'm going to call this teleport, and I'm going to go ahead and bring it up a little bit, anchor it, non-can collide, and 1 on the transparency, and this will act as our teleport part for when the players click teleport to home. I'm also going to make sure that the front is facing the house or wherever you want the players to face when they hit teleport. And the last thing I'm going to do is add a teleport part, or not, I'm sorry, we already did that. I'm going to add a claim part. And I'm just going to make it blue. And I'm going to make it anchored. And that's it. So, and I'm going to call this claim. And I'm going to put it inside the house folder. So now all the houses should be set up like this. Now the build doesn't actually matter. It can be whatever you want. It can be whatever size you want. Okay. So that part really doesn't matter. Of course, and you'll see why in a minute. But I'm going to go ahead and make a new folder and call this houses. And then I'll put house inside of houses, and then duplicate the house folder. And now I have multiple houses inside my houses folder, like so. Now when we actually get scripting, each of these houses will become, well, the parts inside of them will be used to create a house scripting object. Alright, so now it's time to script the server side of the house system. And I'm going to be starting by adding a server script service script to server script service, and I'm going to call it houses. And we'll also need a object-oriented class module, and if you don't already have one, I'll have one that you can download as a free model in the description. I'm just going to go ahead and add a new folder to server storage and call it modules, and import my class object-oriented module. And you can get this as, again, you can get this as a free model in the description. I'm just going to go ahead and import it. And there we go. And then one last thing, we're going to need a class module for the house. So I'm going to go ahead and add a new folder just so I can organize this and call it classes. And a module script and I'll call it house. So here's our house's server script, house's class script, and the classic, this is what I'm using as a Lua object-oriented class module. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do is go into my server script, and I'm going to do, I'm going to require my house class. So house equals require game.serverStorage .classes .house, and then inside of the house class, let's go ahead and make a simple class. So, and here I'm going to import the class module by doing require game.serverStorage.modules.classic, and house will become an extension of class, and I'm going to return house. Now, whenever a new house object is made, in this specific module we use house : new, and I'm just going to leave it blank for now, and that's it. So going back to our server script, I'm going to create a bunch of house objects. I'm going to specifically make one for each of the houses inside of our workspace.houses folder. So, and I'm also going to keep them stored inside of a table so they don't get garbage collected. So I'm going to do local houses equals new table for index house folder, where each of these will be the house folder. That's what I'm referring to. Index house folder in pairs workspace.houses get children do table.insert houses and a new house object, and I declare that by just putting house, that's my house object, new parentheses, and parentheses. Okay, so that will make a whole bunch of house objects and put them in our houses folder, and we'll be able to manage them from here. So going back to the house object, I think I'm going to go ahead and start by inputting the house folder into each object. That would make sense. So house folder into each, and so now each house object will have access to the house folder respective to it. So I can now do what am I going to do? Self.claim part equals house folder dot claim. Self.teleport part equals house folder dot teleport, and this is referring to the claim and teleport part inside of each house, and we're just adding that as properties into our house object by doing self dot and then property name. We're going to have a property for the owner of the house, so I'll do self.owner equals nil. By default, there's no owner. And the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do self.sign label is equal to house folder dot sign dot actually what I'm going to do is just got to rename this part to something GUI part. There we go. Dot sign dot GUI part dot surface GUI dot text label. Yep. There we go. So now I have references in each house object to the owner, the claim part, teleport part, and sign label. These are all useful things that need to change over time. And let's go ahead and add our first event. I'm going to do a claim part touched event. So whenever the part is touched, the claim part is touched, something has to change. Specifically, self.owner has to change. So I'm going to do self.claim part.touched connect function touched part local player is equal to game.players get player from character touched part.parent if player and self.owner is equal to nil, then self.owner is equal to player. So what this says is whenever the part's touched, we're going to try to get a player from the touched part's parent, from the character. And if that player exists and this house does not have an owner, then the new owner will be that player. Okay. And next I'm going to make a update function for this object, house object, called house::update. And what this is basically going to do is make changes to the sign label and teleport part and claim part depending on whether there's an owner or not. So let's go ahead and do self.signLabel.text is equal to self.owner and self.owner.name or no owner. So what this does is if self.owner is true, then we'll go with the self.owners.name. Or if self.owner is not true, we'll go with no owner. So if there's no owner, it'll say no owner. And if there is an owner, it'll go with self.owner.name. Next, I'm going to do self.claim part.parent is equal to self.owner and game.lighting or workspace. And you can replace game.lighting with really whatever, as long as it's out of the workspace. You could do server storage, I guess. But basically, this is the same thing. If there's an owner, then it'll be put in lighting. If there's no owner, it stays in workspace. Now we just have to call this house update function. And the best way to do this is to just go back to our houses server script and iterate through each and every single one of our houses in our table. So that's how this this houses table comes into usefulness. I'm going to do while wait 1, so every 1 second, for index house in pairs houses do house update. So we're iterating for every pair inside of houses where the key is the index and the value is the house object, and we're just going to call update on that house object. So each one of these houses will run this function every second, and their sign label text and their claim part.parent will update accordingly. Alright, so let's go ahead and test what we have so far just to make sure we don't have any errors going on. Okay, it looks like I probably made a typo. So GUI part is not a male member of model. Alright, so I just made a little mistake. I did sign.GUI part, and that's valid here, but I need to go back and rename that for every single one of these signs, and that's why, and that just goes to show why it's important to make sure that you have all of them set up the same way. So one of my houses was correctly set up because I renamed GUI part, but the other two were no good. So let's go ahead and retest that. And doesn't seem to have any errors. Let's go ahead and hit this part. And as you can see, it now updated the sign to say Okeanskiy, my name, and the part disappeared. It got moved to lighting. So that's great. I can now claim a house. But now, if I leave the game, the house will still say my name, and the part will still be gone, and the house will no longer be able to be reclaimed by another player. So what we need to do is add another event for when a player leaves the game, and if that player happens to be the owner of this house, then remove that owner. So let's add a player removing event. Game.players.player removing connect function player. If player is equal to self.owner, then self.owner is equal to nil. So if the player that just left, because all house objects will get this notification, this event, when a player leaves. But if the player that left happened to be this house's self.owner, then this house must be now nil. Or this house owner must be nil. So if I do a 2-player test on a local server, we should have a house that changes back to no owner after the first player that claims it leaves. So I'm going to go ahead and claim this house as player 1, and then I'm going to go ahead and look at it on both screens. You can even see it on the server. I'm going to have player 1 leave, and now it swapped back to no owner, and then I'm going to go ahead and claim it again, and now player 2 owns it. So now, and if I leave again, it should go back to no owner on the server. Alright, so now a player can claim a house, and if they leave, it gets unclaimed and ready to be claimed again. But there's one more thing that we need to add on the server side. Whoops. There's one more thing that we have to add on the server side. And that's because right now a player can go ahead and hit every single button and basically claim every single house. So we need to have a way for each house object to be able to check the owners of all the other houses to see if the player that just touched their house is already an owner of another house. So let's go ahead and the first thing I need to do is I need to give the house object some sort of way to see other house objects. And the best way to do that is to, once again, the usefulness of this houses table in the server script is I'm going to send this houses table into each house object by adding another parameter to the function that actually makes the house object. So we'll do comma houses. So this houses table will get sent as a second parameter, and I'll go ahead and go into the house object and take it, houses, and then actually put it in the object by doing self.houses equals houses. And now we can make a new function that I will call function house. I think I call it isOwner or ownsHouse. ownsHouse player. And this function is basically supposed to take a player and return true if they do own a house and return false if they don't own a house. So the first thing I'm going to do is return false, and then for index house, so we're iterating through each house object again, just like we did here in the update function. We're kind of doing the same thing, iterating through each houses in self.houses. Do if house.owner is equal to the player in question, then return true. So we're given a player. If we find a house that has the same owner as this player, then return true because that player does own a house. And if no owner is found, then they must not own a house. Let's return false. And then we go back up to the claim part touch, and we say something along the lines of, if player exists and this house does not have an owner and self owns house player is equal to false. So I do self because this is a function of the house object. I'm calling owns, I'm calling ownsHouse function given the player, and this must return false. This player must not already own a house, and if that condition is true, then this if statement can continue, and the owner can be the new player. So if I go ahead and test this, I should be able to claim the first house I touch, but the next one should not work. So if I go ahead and click this one, it works. And if I go ahead and hit the next one, I should not be able to claim it. And there you go. No owner. Alright, so that is everything to the house system, with the exception of the optional teleport system that I'll go ahead and add in just a minute. Okay, so let's go ahead and add that teleport home GUI for each of the players. The first thing I'm going to do is add a folder to replicated storage and put my remotes inside this remotes folder. And there's just one remote, but I still like to keep it in a folder nice and organized. And I'll just call this teleport home remote event. And then I'll just go ahead and copy the GUI from earlier and just paste it into starter GUI. It's nothing special, it's just a text button with a local script inside. It basically just says local teleport home is replicated storage, wait for child remotes, wait for child teleport home. And then on the event of the script.parent, which is the text button, mouse button one click, that's the event for clicking a GUI button. Connect that with a function that just says teleport home, that remote event, call fire server on it, and that will fire from the client to the server to say I want to teleport to my house. So all we have to do now is go into our house object and add a third event that says player fired teleport home remote event. Okay, and we're just going to go ahead and grab that remote event by doing get game.replicated storage remotes teleport home, and then we'll listen for the on server event and connect that to a function. Now the player that we're given on server event is player, the player that fired it, so we know which one we're dealing with. And if self.owner is equal to player, so if the owner of this specific house is equal to player, then we know that this is the house that we're talking about. And if that is true, then let's call a function called self teleportOwner. Okay, and then we'll just add a function at the bottom, just like we did earlier with ownsHouse. We'll add one called house teleportOwner for each of the house objects. Every single one of these functions basically essentially gets copied into each house object, so they each have their own copy. Because they each have their own self, they're their own object. Anyway, self.owner.character.humanoid root part .cframe is equal to self.teleport part.cframe. So teleporting is real simple. Again, if self.owner is equal to player, then we'll call this teleportOwner function, and we'll just take the owner's character humanoid root part and set its cframe to the same as our teleport part, which is part of our object. That's why I do self.teleport part, and just set this cframe equal to this cframe, and then we'll put them together. Okay, and I think that is it. Let's go ahead and test it one more time. I'll do a 2-player test so we can make sure everything works in one demonstration. Alright, so here is player 1. He's going to go ahead and claim this house, and he's going to teleport home, and that's going to send him here. Player 2 will click teleport home, but that won't do anything because he doesn't have a house. He doesn't have a house yet. I'll walk over, claim this house. That will change to player 2. I can now teleport to this house. Player 1 can still teleport to his house, and they're separate from each other. And if I go ahead and remove player 2, player 1 still has his house. Player 2 goes back to, or this house goes back to no owner. Player 1 leaves. Now they all say no owner, and they're ready to run again. Alright, so that was it. I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. Hopefully it was helpful. Hopefully you made use of the object-oriented module. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to leave a comment or add me on Discord. Join my Discord server. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video.